So far from God and so close to the United States. The famous quote, attributed to former Mexican President Porfirio Diaz, now seems to apply to Venezuela. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores are being held at a detention center in New York to face charges ranging from drug trafficking to possession of heavy weaponry. U.S. President Donald Trump has warned that acting Venezuelan President Delcy Rodriguez will pay a big price, probably bigger than Maduro, if she doesn't do, quote unquote, what's right. Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council is to convene an emergency meeting on the matter on Monday following a request from Venezuela. How precarious is the situation in Venezuela? How far will the U.S. go to protect its sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere? And what will be the geopolitical repercussions for Latin America? I'm pleased to be joined from Santiago, Chile by Vijay Prashad, Director of Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, and from Shanghai, Zhang Chu, Professor of the School of International Relations and Public Affairs at Fudan University. Welcome to both of you. Vijay, let me go straight to you. So, according to what you have learned, what's the latest on the ground in Caracas, the capital of Venezuela? How are people reacting overwhelmingly? Are they celebrating Maduro's seizure, or are they protesting against the use of force by the United States?
It's a very important question. It's very difficult to answer it categorically, obviously. I was on the phone with people in Caracas while the bombing was happening, actually, after 2 a.m. In Caracas, when the bombing started. It was an unbelievable attack on Venezuela. 150 U.S. aircrafts bombed that city, parts of 3 other states. They used weaponry against the air defense systems. They destabilized them with EA-18 Growlers, which flew from Puerto Rico. It was a show of force that I don't think has been registered yet around the world. For the first 12 hours, people in Caracas and other parts of Venezuela were in shock. This is a shocking incident that a country the size and scale of Venezuela was unable to protect its president. The president was snatched from the country. There is precedent for this, because in 1989, the United States went into Panama and seized sitting Panamanian President Manuel Noriega and took him to Florida, again on charges of drug trafficking. This is different. Venezuela is not Panama. It's a much bigger country. It has some sophisticated air defense systems. But I must say, it's important for us to understand the United States does not spend over $1 trillion a year on its military not to have developed some really sophisticated and hard-hitting weaponry. Mr. Trump said so. He said, we made Venezuela dark. He said, we have ways to do that, but I'm not going to talk about it. And that's what they did. The people were in shock. After the first 24 hours, there were protests on the street against the abduction of the president. There was an open mic session outside the National Assembly. Number of ordinary people came and spoke there. Of course, there were some celebrations, but those were in the richer parts of town. This is a struggle between the poor and the rich in Venezuela. It's very clear what the battle lines are.
In Chile, though, in neighboring countries, how are people reacting to this?
The continent of South America is incredibly divided. It is divided along the axis of who supports the Chavez Bolivarian revolution and who opposes it. You've got to understand that in recent years, there's been an upsurge of the right wing across Latin America, whether it's Javier Milei in Argentina or in Chile itself. Jose Antonio Cast is going to take power later this year. He already won the presidential election in Bolivia, the right, and so on and so forth. There are presidential elections this year in Colombia and in Brazil. There's fear that the right is going to make gains in both those countries. The so-called pink tide, the tide of the Chavez revolution, is in retreat. There is no doubt that there's an angry tide, a tide of anger and toxicity that has emerged. And in a sense, Mr. Trump's attack on Venezuela was a way to open the door for this angry tide, not only in other parts of the continent, but in Venezuela, then in Nicaragua, and finally, I think Marco Rubio and Donald Trump hope in Cuba.
Let's come back to that in just a moment, but let's look at the situation in Venezuela domestically. And Professor Zhang, let me come to you. Now, the government of Venezuela has not collapsed, as we can tell. There's an acting president, President Rodriguez, and she has sent out some very firm messages, such as they were going to fight against U.S. imperialism. But in a public letter to the world, including to the United States, she also seemed to have extended an invitation to work with the United States to further development cooperation, for instance, and to peacefully coexist under the framework of international law. How do you interpret her messages? Is Venezuela likely, is the government of Venezuela to collapse or to capitulate under this harsh U.S. pressure?
Right. So currently, I think the internal geopolitics within Venezuela itself is still highly complicated. And right now, like you said, there are very different voices from different sides. And at the moment, the regime is still there, and they are still resisting the United States military operation. But at the same time,
but you're not. But are you serious when you use the word regime? Because regime means it is not illegitimate, or do you want to say government?
Government, right? Government. I think it's right. It's a better word here. And right now, the thing is that the United States has also threatened to say that they are also going to support a new government, and it seems that they have another transition plan. So right now, it's still very hard to say. And right now, the key issue here is that without as the ex-president was already arrested, was already taken by the United States. And as right now the United States has very strong intelligence and military power, is very hard to remain. And also it's very likely to see a further divided geopolitics in the future.
Vijay, what is your take on what is likely to happen in Venezuela, seeing the messages and the figures that are in play at this moment?
Well, in Mr. Trump's national security strategy, he sort of answers your opening question, which is about whether this is an empire in retreat or an empire out there to assert itself. What he says is, in that national security document, is that the United States recognizes that there is a rising China and so on. So the United States has to secure the Western Hemisphere. In other words, the United States has to enact the 1823 Monroe Doctrine with the Trump corollary, which means that by any means the U.S. is going to dominate the Western Hemisphere. So they are going to put maximum pressure on Venezuela. They are going to do whatever it takes to get the government that's there now, led by Delcy Rodriguez, to make concessions to the United States. I don't actually interpret the letter that she sent as a concession. I think she's just trying to say, let's not continue this bombardment. You know, there's a recognition that Venezuela cannot withstand this. You know, what are they supposed to do? What is Delcy Rodriguez supposed to do? Is she supposed to counter with some kind of military attack on the United States? That would be suicidal. You know, this is not 2003. This is 2026. The United States has improved its military capacity far and beyond shock and awe, which it used against Iraq in 2003. This is at a different scale. I think the Venezuelans are trying to be realistic, and that's why they don't want to intensify this. They're also hoping that in the UN Security Council, Colombia, China, Russia, and others will speak firmly on behalf of the violation of the UN Charter, Article 2, Section 4 and 7 directly violated by the United States government.
Yet, speaking of the so-called Donroe doctrine, a new play of words to put Donald and Monroe in one word, how is that being perceived? Because it's glaring that the message of imperialism, of hegemony, against sovereign countries in that region, is this Donroe doctrine and the latest military attacks going to spark a new wave of anti-US sentiment or greater sense of awareness of what's in front of them? Vijay, again.
I think this is going to create a lot of confusion in Latin America for several reasons. And this is not the first time, because Donald Trump intervened directly in the local elections in Argentina when he threatened the Argentinian people, saying, if you don't vote for the supporters of Javier Milei, we're going to cut off financing for Argentina. And lo and behold, extremely unpopular Javier Milei got a boost in the local elections. So we are seeing the United States government exert itself with a great deal of arrogance across Latin America. This is going to create more and more confusion. Why do I say confusion? The largest trading partner for most countries in Latin America is China. For instance, Chile. Chile cannot survive without its trade with China. So when Jose Antonio Cast, the far right-wing president of the country, is going to start making comments about the United States, China, and so on, this is going to create confusion in the country amongst the business community. Forget the wider left and social movements that are actually in despair about what's happened in Venezuela and what could happen in Cuba.
Let me ask Professor Jiang Chuchu there this question, which is on the mind of a lot of people. What is China's takeaway from all of this? And how is this incident potentially going to affect China's policy of engaging with countries in Latin America, in your understanding?
Right. From my observation, actually, China is very concerned with what's going on right now in Venezuela. And actually, China has substantial investment in this country, including large infrastructure projects. So political instability in Venezuela could potentially disrupt all these projects and lead to economic losses for China. And meanwhile, we also have to note that the political turmoil in Venezuela is also actually causing or affecting instability in Iran, which is currently experiencing protests. So social unrest in several major oil-producing countries could potentially lead to significant fluctuations in oil prices. And we know that although China imports a very limited amount of oil directly from Venezuela, as China is a large importer of oil from the world, right now the fluctuation in oil prices could affect China's economy. But also at the same time, I think politically speaking, China and the United States have formed very different foreign policy, as we can see. So right now, because China has always advocated respecting the sovereignty of other countries and non-interference principle in the internal affairs, so we can see this big contrast between the two countries.
Right. At this moment, what do you imagine the Chinese leadership may be doing, looking at what's happening in Venezuela, and will it make China hesitant in terms of investing in Latin American countries? Because that has been clearly declared to be United States' backyard once again.
Right. So I think right now the most important thing for China is to protect the security of our overseas residents in Venezuela, and also to protect our economic losses and to prevent further losses. And also we need to evaluate what is going to happen next, and to see how we are going to further promote the Belt and Road Initiative and other initiatives in the region. But at the same time, I think China is also advocating de-escalating the tensions, and also to further bring peace and stability to the region under the framework of international norms and international organizations represented by United Nations.
Right. Let's look at the specific charges being levied on President Maduro, and there are, for this time, 4 charges related to drug trafficking, narco-terrorism, for instance, importation of drugs, possession of machine guns and other devices, or the conspiracy to possess machine guns and other devices devices. Another detail which is being talked about by some people is somehow President Maduro seemed rather at ease, relaxed when he was being escorted by U.S. Law enforcement officers. Vijay, what do you make of the charges on him and how he is conducting himself, apparently?
Well, there's a couple of things about that conduct. One is when people are extradited, when they are grabbed, thrown on a plane, flown a pretty, large distance, disoriented, they are sometimes given relaxation drugs. So we don't know what his mental state really was. Also, I've interviewed Nicolás Maduro many times in person. I know him very well. He's an extremely affable and nice guy. So it's likely when he got off the plane, he was saying Happy New Year to people. Hello. He's practicing his English. His English is appalling. I mean, he's that kind of person. I don't think this should be read as evidence of some kind of deal. There's a lot of rumors swirling about, and I wouldn't take most of them seriously. I think they are really part of the psychological operations of something like this. In terms of the charges, I mean, they are prima facie ridiculous. The United States government has an agency, the Drug Enforcement Agency. I went back and read the last 10 years of public reports from the Drug Enforcement Agency. Those reports show that there is absolute clarity within the United States government that 85% of cocaine and fentanyl comes out of Colombia and Mexico, and it comes on the Pacific side of the waters, not in the Caribbean. There is no mention of Nicolás Maduro Moros in any of these reports. This is an absolutely fabricated charge against Mr. Maduro. And the idea that you can charge him with weapons possession in the United States, which has no jurisdiction on this, is crazy. By the way, there is something called immunity of heads of state. It's a provision. Yeah. It's customary law. The only way that can be taken away is if there is an international criminal court warrant, and there isn't one. There's no UN Security Council resolution
Vijay,
for the US to attack Venezuela, and there's no ICC warrant.
Yeah, Vijay, very quickly, I know you're passionate, you devoted yourself to the cause of the Global South. Is there a negative impact on the cause for the Global South by this incident? Very briefly, please.
Look, yes, no, frankly, this is absolutely a blow to people, because to see the United States operate like this at a time of its decline is, I think, horrifying. And to see that nobody is able to stop the US doing this is an echo of the genocide against the Palestinians, which continues. I think there's a real sense of demoralization across the world because of this.
But is there a glimmer of hope at the same time, Vijay? Yes or no?
Absolutely. Absolutely, there's a glimmer of hope. There are demonstrations across the world saying that Mr. Maduro and Cilia Flores must be released and returned to Venezuela. People are angered at the same time as they are, as I said, confused really more than anything.
All right. Thank you so much, Vijay. And I took the opportunity, sorry to Ms. Zhang Chuchu, I took the opportunity to find out more from Vijay because he is on the ground on that part of the world. So I hope you can understand this. I really appreciated your insights. Vijay Prashad, Director of Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, and Zhang Chuchu, Professor of the School of International Relations and Public Affairs at Fudan University.